It means, like Abraham, hearing God's call and going. Like Sarah, hearing God's promise and against all odds, believing. Like Moses, enduring hardship for the sake of something and someone greater. Hebrews 11 isn't a who's who of perfect people. It's a record of Old Testament men and women who saw God as more valuable than their own lives. They believed, even in the face of roaring lions. They trusted, long before the walls fell down. What inspired them to go? To wait, to sacrifice, to risk it all, is the same thing we seek to walk in today. Daring faith in a perfect God.
Hebrews chapter 11, and we've been looking at these heroes of the faith, these guys that stood firm, that had lots of courage, that endured. So what I'd like to do to start this sermon is do a little bit of flippity-flop with that and look at some times in history where people probably wished they hadn't given up a little too quickly. All right, so let's go back 100 years ago to an instance where you guys probably, some of you may know this, it happened in Boston, Massachusetts, to the Red Sox. They decided to sell one of their players, it's like, well, who's this guy, to the New York Yankees. And this New York Yankee went on to hit more home runs than the entire Red Sox organization in 10 of the next 12 seasons in baseball. And who was that guy they sold to the Yankees? The Sultan of Swat, the King of Crash, the Colossus of the Babe Ruth, the Great Bambino, for all of you that watch Sandlot, that you guys got it. All right, so let's jump ahead 90 years. Probably wish they wouldn't have done that. Who is this guy, right? 90 years later, in 2010, was the very first Bitcoin transaction. A man named Laszlo Heinrichs, probably butchering that last name, but he decided he was going to treat his family to 2 pizzas, which he bought for 10,000 Bitcoin. I don't know if you realize how much 10,000 Bitcoin would be today, but that would be $700 million. You could buy 67 million pizzas for that for today. Okay. Most of you know Apple, and if you're smart, you've got an Apple phone, right? Not one of those. I'm kidding. You have Android, hey, whatever. Do a deal with the devil, it's okay. I'm kidding, I'm joking. I really don't care that much. But I don't know how many of you realize that there were 3 founders of Apple. 2 guys everybody knows, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, but there's a third. Does anybody know who it is? Ronald Wayne. And he sold his 10% of the Apple company in 1976 for how much? $800. That would be worth 10%, $350 billion today. There are times we're like, man, why did I give up on that so fast? Why can't, if I could have a do-over. And we all have those stories of, I wish I wouldn't have given up. I wish I would have endured. So the question for today is, how do we persevere? How do we stand firm? And the guy we're going to look at in Hebrews today was a guy that did not give up. He was a guy that he probably had every reason to give up. It was stacked against him. It didn't make sense for him to go forward, follow God, but he didn't. He stayed true, and that guy was Moses. An amazing example of endurance. We're going to start in verse 23 of Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to read here. It says, by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child. Yeah, how about that for parents? Very nice. I love that. Okay. And they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. Now, the book of Hebrews was all about, it was written to people that they had endured a lot. Land had been taken. They'd been beaten. They'd been suffering. They were about to give up. And the writer of Hebrews wrote this book to encourage these people so that they would endure. So I want us to look at that word endure today. It's really the Greek word. Here's our Greek lesson for the day. Hupomeno. Everybody say it? You guys do better. You're Greek. Hupomeno. Meno was to stand. Hupo is our prefix where we get hyper. So it's really like to hyper stand. Hyper standing is like if you went to the beach this summer and you went into the waves. And I don't know if as a kid I would just say, hey, can I stand firm and not let those waves knock me over? And that is hyper standing. Now, we went on a canoe trip about a month ago, and there's certain points of the river where it's going a little faster, and the current's a little bit, and you could stand in there, and you could try to hyperstand, and there might have been a time when maybe we weren't hyperstanding with the canoe well enough, and it got stuck, and it hyperstood in a tree thing, and it was hard to get it out. But we're not talking about canoes, are we? We're talking about people. And the question really is, can I be a durable person in my faith in this time, here and now? Is it possible to endure? And the answer, of course, is yes. And in fact, the whole purpose of Hebrews is to show you that it's possible to hyperstand, how it's possible to not get knocked off our feet when it comes to obeying God. And so we're going to look at Moses. We're going to look at what he endured and also how he did it. So here's what he endured. What we read in this passage was 4 crisis points in Moses' life. Very first crisis point that we see is that Moses rejected the Egyptian royalty. He rejected his being known as Pharaoh's daughter. We see there in verse 24 and 25, it says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God. As the story goes, Pharaoh had decided that, we got to do something about these Israelites, and he was going to wipe out all the men, and so then incorporate the women and the little girls, and so maybe they would get more ingrained in Egyptian culture. So he says, hey, we're going to kill all the Israelite boys. Moses' parents put him in a little wicker basket. They sent him down the Nile River where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing. She adopts him. A lot of you know that story. That's what happened. But then let's talk about how Moses grew and what advantages he had because of that. He had the best training the world had to offer at that time. The best education. And you also realize he had access to the most important, influential, and powerful people at the world at that time. He had an incredible life ahead of him. Now, we learned about another guy a couple weeks ago named Joseph. There's a lot of comparisons in many ways with Joseph and Moses because Joseph was also an Egyptian and also an Israelite. But the big difference is that Moses realized he had to choose a side. Because the Israelites, they'd become too powerful, and they scared Pharaoh. And Pharaoh then started to exploit them, oppress them, beat them, and eventually turned them into slaves. So Moses realized he had that choice to make. He's either going to be a prince of Egypt or a leader of the Israelites. He could not do both like Joseph had in the past. He knew the choice was coming. But one day, that choice ambushed him. So those princes of Egypt do, I don't know, that he was out walking along one day, and as the story goes, he's doing his thing, whatever that might be, and he comes across an Egyptian taskmaster who is just beating a helpless Israelite slave. And Moses goes over and he kills him. Moses throws his lot in with the Israelites. He's like, all right, I'm going with my people. What he doesn't know, though, is that he's going to have another choice that's about the same thing, but it's going to be a whole lot harder the very next day. See, in verse 27, it says, by faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. And you're probably thinking, all right, Brian, what's going on here? Well, here's what happened, because on the very next day, he's out doing what he does, right? He's walking along, and this time, though, he sees 2 Israelites duking it out. And he comes up and he says, stop fighting. Stop it. Stop it out. And what do? They turn to Moses and they say, who made you judge over us? Are you going to kill us like you killed that Egyptian? At this point, Moses knows, whoa, that's gotten out. Suddenly it hit Moses that this was not a secret. But you know what the worst part is? Now he knows. Now he knows that his people have rejected him. So that's his crisis point too. Moses was rejected by his own people. And why? It's because they resented him, because he had self-appointed himself. They were frightened of him. So suddenly, in one day, Moses goes from having 2 people to having no people. Now, here's why I think this choice was so amazing. Because we know enough about history. We know enough about those ancient times where, you know what, you had special privileges if you were part of the royalty. If you were a son or daughter of Pharaoh, you could do some things not everybody else could do, correct? You realize Moses probably could have gone up to Granddad Pharaoh or Dad Pharaoh, however it was. He could have gone up there and said, hey, you know what? I made an oopsie. And he's like, well, what'd you do? Well, I killed somebody. And Pharaoh would probably say, well, who was it? And if Moses said, well, it was just some taskmaster, Pharaoh would have said, why are you bothering me with this? We get to do things not everybody else gets to do. Just move along, move along. You killed a commoner? No problem. All right. Moses knew this. Moses knew he could go back, but he realized if Moses stayed true to his identification with his people, the Israelites, he would be an outcast. And he would always be an outcast, an eternal fugitive from the wrath of the man who is the most powerful person in the world. He knew he could go back. He knew if he walked away from his principles, and he could probably even justify it, if he ignored those principles, he could be safe. Or he could do the right thing and face absolute career suicide and possibly even death. To be faithful now meant running off into the desert, possibly killed, and to be on the run for the rest of his life, and not to become that great leader in which he had been trained for. But Moses decided to do the right thing. He decided to obey, even though it meant the end of everything. And this is the point where I think so many of us, it's so easy to look at Moses' story and say, yeah, well, that makes sense, but then to look at our stories and go, I don't know. It seems a little crazy. Here's a man with tremendous leadership skills. His people needed him desperately. And look what happened to him. He's a shepherd, stuck out in the desert for years, a member of a marginal group of people, a bunch of nobodies. And his 40s come and go. And then his 50s, nothing happens. His 60s, there they go. His 70s, Uneventful. But then when he turned 80 years old, what happens? God shows up with a burning bush, and God says, I have a job for you. And this is when God confronts Moses, or God tells Moses to confront Pharaoh. Crisis point number 3. God says, even though you're just a member of this little tribe of shepherds, even though you're a nobody now, I want you to do 2 things for me. First, I want you to walk up to Pharaoh, the most powerful person in the world at this time, and I want you to tell him, I want to take your entire free labor force, and they're going to come with me. First thing I want you to do. But I also want you to understand that these people are going to gripe, they're going to complain, they're going to act like little children the entire time, they're not going to be appreciative, and Pharaoh is going to come after you the entire time. And Moses did it. He went to Pharaoh. Which leads us to crisis point number 4. Verse 29 says, by faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. Fourth crisis point. He's got the Red Sea in front of him. What's he going to do? He's got the mountains over here. He's got Pharaoh's army barreling down at him, and he is stuck right in front of this vast ocean. What's Pharaoh do? He looks at his people and says, Leroy Jenkins, right? He says, let's go, let's do it. But how does a man do this? How does a man get that type of endurance? We see the same thing with Abraham, because with Abraham and with Moses, at every spot, we see that the test gets a little harder and a little harder, but Moses endures each time. So, that's what he endured. Now, how did he do it? All right, I'm giving you 3 secrets of Christian endurance. I thought secret seemed a little more, a secret, we need to hear secrets. It's really just 3 verbs, but 3 secrets to how we endure as Christians. Now, the very first thing I want to just make very, very clear, Christian endurance is a lot more hopeful than just, hey, I'm going to just stand there, I'm going to grit my teeth, and no matter what happens, I'm just going to do my best, and I'm going to use my willpower, and we're just going to do it. That's not Christian endurance. This is how he did it. Verse 26, it says, he regarded, that's the word, he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. So secret 1 is we regard, we assess, we think, we evaluate. It's the same word that Paul uses in Philippians 3:8. He says, what is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord, for whose sake I've lost all things. I consider them garbage that I may gain Christ. I don't know how many of you may watch the show like Antique Roadshow or maybe Pawn Stars, one of those types of shows, because one of the things that I kind of find fun with those shows is that someone will give somebody a family heirloom or something they found up in their attic that some person, hey, that's really, really valuable. And what do? Because most of us are lay people. We don't know exactly what's going on, but we take that brooch or we take that lamp or that Hot Wheels car or Pokemon card or whatever it might be, and they go to the pawn store and they say, hey, tell me about this. And what's the guy say? Hold on 1 second, I've got a guy. And they do a whole thing about bringing in the expert, correct? And the expert on Pokemon cards comes in and says, this is garbage. I'll give you a nickel for it. And it's probably not even worth a nickel. I know it's important to you, so, right? Or, the expert says, you don't even know what you have here. This is a Babe Ruth rookie card when he was in the Boston Red Sox. This is worth millions of dollars. Moses became that expert. And here's why. Because Moses knew you're only as durable as the thing you love most. You're only as durable as the thing you love most. Moses said and understood, if I can love something that will last forever, then I'll last forever. But if I love anything vulnerable, I'll be vulnerable. I'm only as durable as the thing I love most. There's a philosopher, theologian, he passed away about 10 years ago, Thomas Oden. He wrote an article saying this is how the human heart works. It works in three ways. Number one, the human heart is goal-oriented. We all have to have something that we need to look forward to. But number two, sometimes we have lots of goals, but all those goals are going to compete with one another. But there's only one goal in which will be the supreme goal, and all those other goals will be judged by that goal. Number three, he says it this way. He says, if you choose a finite, destroyable, fragile center of value, you will always be anxious. He goes on to say, suppose my center of value is my health or my political party or my attractiveness or my financial productivity. If my center of value is any of these things, when these things are under threat, and they always are, I will be shaken to the depths. You see what he's saying? If you choose anything but God as your infinite source of value, you'll be shakeable. Moses figured this out. And if I decide I need somebody to love me, wife, kids, whatever that might be, or my reputation, that's really important. My job, grades, government, friends, family. Now, hey, these things are not bad, right? These are fine things. But they're not meant to hold the weight of eternity. They will fail. Okay, one of my favorite apologists out there is John Lennox. I don't know if many of you know John Lennox, but he's an Irish professor in math, but I would encourage all of you to go out and go to YouTube, listen to John Lennox. Just his Irish accent is worth listening to, all right? But he went to Oxford. He went to Cambridge. He actually was there when C.S. Lewis was there, okay? He talks about going to lectures with him. His story is just incredible. But probably the story that hit me the most with John Lennox is that he was a 19-year-old student. 19-year-old student. He went to listen to a Nobel Prize-winning professor. He's 19 years old. And the chaplain of the school comes and tells John Lennox, hey, I'd like us to go talk to this Nobel Prize-winning professor. Come with me. Chaplain did this, all right? The Nobel Prize-winning professor looks at 19-year-old Lennox and says, you need to renounce your faith. It's naive. And you need to do it publicly. Nobel Prize-winning professor doing this, and he says you need to do it because it will stunt your growth as a scientific person in our community. John Lennox looks at him and he says, 19 years old, tell me, what do you have to offer me that's better than what I have in Christ? John Lennox got it. Moses, he understood it. He assessed. He thought about it. As Christians, we think it up. We reason it. We regard. All right, secret one. Secret two. Chose. Moses chose. He chose to obey even if there's suffering. Verse 25, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. And at this point, you might think, well, Moses chose to be mistreated. No, that's not the case. That, if you read it that way, you've got it completely wrong. He didn't look for suffering, but he decided to obey even though there might be suffering. He was going to obey through the suffering. And I think the great temptation of all of us is that when we have something God is saying, hey, I need you to obey here, and if we look and it looks like it's going to cost a lot, there is going to be a whole lot of suffering involved in all this. What do we start doing at that point? That's when we start rationalizing. That's when we start going, well, you know what? I've got all this training. Would God really do all that training if he didn't want me to do that? I'm going to risk it all. I'm going to lose it all if I do that sort of thing. But we look to Moses, and we look to see how easy it would have been for him to rationalize this, because he's got all this training. He goes out on a limb for his people. He risks everything for them. And they're a bunch of ungrateful slobs. It's been so easy for him to say, God, why should I be faithful to you now because of these people? A bunch of just unappreciative jerks. And to be faithful to you might mean the end of my life, and surely you've got so much more for me to do. It's a waste of my talents. Here's the one Hebrew in the whole world who's got the connections, he's got the knowledge, he's got the training, he's got the ability, he's got the intellect. They need him. What a complete waste. And Moses decides to obey anyway. And here's the big question. Did God ruin his life? No. What Moses didn't realize until afterwards is that he needed 2 levels of leadership training. He needed that Egyptian level of training. He needed the book work. But he also needed to be humbled. He needed self-control. He had to go out and live with simple people to be able to lead those people. See, a prince of Egypt, they can go out and they can have a fit and they could kill somebody, but a prince of Israel cannot do that. The Israelites were afraid of him, and rightfully so. And if he had decided to lead and had the Israelites let him lead right after he killed that Egyptian, it would have been a disaster. When it looks like obedience leads to disaster, we obey. Because obedience is actually taking us away from disaster. Now lastly, last secret, Moses saw him who was invisible. Secret 3 is that we are to see the invisible God. I know I'm changing tenses, but that's all right. Verse 27 says, by faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible. Moses was reminding himself who God is. Like almost every one of those songs we're saying, God is everything we need. My God provided. He constantly saw God. And that means he disciplined himself to remember who God is. And you know how somebody does that? He asked this question of himself over and over. You ready for the question? Here we go. What makes me think that I am wiser than God? What makes me think that I'm smarter than God? What makes me think that I can see things God can see? Because if that's the case, we don't want a God that's as smart as me or you. And that's what Moses did. You know how you stand? You know how you hyperstand? You assess. You choose. You see the wisdom of God. Moses did that. But do you realize that we get to see more than what Moses saw? We know of a man who left a greater palace than the palace of Pharaoh. And we know of somebody who came to his people and they rejected him, but they didn't just kick him out of the land. They killed him. And we see the rejection of Moses, it led to the salvation of the Israelites, but we see that the very defeat of the man that is greater than Moses led to the greatest triumph of the entire world. See, we see the wisdom of God that in a way Moses never did, because we see the wisdom of God in the cross. And so when we face life's problems, we ask ourselves, am I wiser than God? Jesus, I rejected you, yet you were faithful to me. So I'm not going to reject you again. Jesus, you were faithful. Even though it looked like destruction, it was really redemption. And so now, in my situation, I guarantee it wasn't as big as that. My situation, what I'm dealing with here and now, I'm going to remain faithful. Even though it may look like disaster, I know it will be redemption. Do you see? Do you see that we shouldn't be able to just take on the Red Sea? We should be able to take on the Atlantic Ocean. And I want to lead you one last thing. It's kind of like a little, we don't do a benediction ever, but it's kind of like a little bit of a benediction. I'm going to put Psalm 16:8 on the board. And this is kind of what I want us to end with and what I want us to think about as you walk away and you go throughout your week. So with that, I want everybody to read this with me and read it out, because this is how we stand firm. This is how we hyper stand. All right, you guys ready to read it with me? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Let's be a people we regard, that we choose God, and that we see the invisible God. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for stories like Moses. And I thank you that we have these examples so that we can learn from them as we walk in our own lives, that we think about these things, that we choose you, and we put our faith in you. And when we do that, we will not be shaken. That's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, Parkview. Here are a few things that you won't want to miss. If you've ever thought about getting involved in our kids or student ministries, mark your calendars for Sunday, August 23rd. We'll be hosting a lunch and learn after the service, where you can enjoy a great meal and hear how you can make a difference in the lives of the next generation. Lunch begins at 12 p.m. Ladies, our next women's praise and worship gathering is coming up on Sunday, August 16th. It's from 5 to 6 p.m., and we hope you'll join us for an evening of worship and encouragement. Looking ahead, Kids WOW and junior high groups kick off for the fall on Wednesday, September 2nd. If you have children from preschool through junior high, we're excited to welcome them back for another great year together. And finally, life groups begin again on September 13th. If you're looking for a great way to build relationships and grow in your faith, be sure to stop by the Connections table and sign up. And lastly, an announcement from Megan Johnson about Caring Closet, and that will conclude the service.
Okay, bye Mom and Dad, love you. Oh hey, I didn't see you there. I was just on my way to my first day of school. Do you want to know what's in my backpack? Come on, let's get a tour. I'm so excited for the school year, and I just got this backpack. It's from my favorite show, and I have all my supplies inside of it that I want to show you. So I have my crayon box, and it has all my crayons, all my Ticonderoga pencils, and it has all my colored pencils in it as well. I also have a bottle of glue, pink scissors, my favorite color, a ton of glue sticks. Next is my favorite part. I have these really sparkly folders, and last but not least, my neon green notebook. I cannot wait for this school year. The Caring Closet is a ministry organization that Parkview has done for a very long time, but what it is that we gift some students from District 348 school supplies and clothing that need it for the school year.
Please join us here at the church at 9 a.m. on August 8th for our packing party. We really need your guys' help, and we look forward to seeing you there.